something shifted between Rory McIlroy and the PGA Tour's new leadership, and most golf fans completely missed the exact moment it happened. It wasn't during the LIV golf battle. It wasn't when Rory stepped away from the PGA Tour Policy Board. And it wasn't after another controversial headline surrounding professional golf. It happened just days before Brian Rolapp was preparing to announce the biggest competitive shakeup in PGA Tour history, a restructuring touching 47 events and roughly 230 players. Rory McIlroy walked up to a microphone and, in one blunt phrase, compared the tour's new plan to a glorified minor league. Those words carried so much weight that Brian Rolapp picked up the phone and called Rory personally, before he ever stepped in front of the cameras to reveal his vision for the future of the sport. Think about that for a second. Rory doesn't currently hold a board seat. He isn't making official decisions for the PGA Tour. Yet, before making the biggest announcement of his leadership career, Brian Rolapp knew there was one conversation he needed to have first, and it was with Rory McIlroy. So what did Rory actually say? Why did one offhand comment become urgent enough for the incoming commissioner to respond to it personally? And what does that tell us about how much control players still have over the direction of professional golf? Before we get into it, I want to hear from you. If you were Brian Rolapp, would Rory McIlroy be the first person you'd call before changing the future of the PGA Tour? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe, because this story is far from over. That private conversation didn't happen by accident. It happened because Rory McIlroy publicly said something that immediately changed how people viewed the PGA Tour's plans for the future of professional golf. Just 1 week before Brian Rolapp's historic announcement, Rory stood in front of reporters at Shinnecock Hills during U.S. Open Media Day and shared his thoughts on the PGA Tour's proposed two-tier competitive structure. At first, his response sounded cautious. He admitted that he was still evaluating what the changes could mean for players and tournaments across the sport. Then he delivered 6 words that instantly became the biggest talking point in golf. Track 2 is a glorified Korn Ferry event. Those 6 words carried far more weight than an ordinary criticism of a new format. Coming from Rory McIlroy, the player who publicly defended the PGA Tour during some of its most difficult moments, they raised serious questions about how the tour's biggest stars truly felt about the direction of the sport. More importantly, they transformed what should have been a straightforward announcement into something much bigger. Suddenly, Brian Rolapp wasn't simply introducing a new vision for professional golf. He was preparing to address concerns raised by one of its most influential voices. Rory's comments weren't simply about criticizing a new format. His biggest concern was what those changes could mean for some of the most historic tournaments on the PGA Tour. During his media appearance, he specifically pointed to the RBC Canadian Open as an example. This isn't just another stop on the schedule. It's one of the oldest and most respected tournaments in professional golf, and it's an event Rory himself has won twice. For him, the conversation wasn't only about prize money or rankings. It was about preserving the identity and prestige that certain tournaments have spent decades building. Under the proposed structure, some prestigious events could potentially find themselves competing outside the PGA Tour's top tier if they couldn't meet the financial requirements associated with the championship series. That possibility immediately raised concerns about whether history and tradition would eventually become secondary to economics. Rory also made another revealing comment that received far less attention. He explained that he intends to continue playing the schedule that works for him, a schedule that, in his own words, is becoming smaller as the years go on. For Brian Rolapp and the PGA Tour, those words may have been just as significant as the Korn Ferry comparison itself. When one of the game's biggest stars begins questioning both the structure and his future participation, people at every level of professional golf pay attention. By the time Brian Rolapp prepared to unveil the PGA Tour's new competitive structure, Rory McIlroy's comments had already become one of the biggest discussions surrounding the announcement. What was supposed to be a landmark moment for the tour suddenly carried far greater expectations. Rolapp wasn't introducing a minor adjustment to the PGA Tour calendar. He was presenting one of the most significant competitive overhauls professional golf has seen in decades. The proposed framework was designed to create a more merit-based system, separating the tour into two competitive levels while rewarding performance with promotion opportunities and increasing the stakes throughout the season. On paper, the plan offered everything modern professional sports strive for: clear consequences, greater competition, and a pathway designed to reward the best performers. But professional golf isn't built on structure alone. The success of any major change ultimately depends on whether the people who define the sport believe in it. Players, sponsors, broadcasters, and fans all play a role in determining whether a new vision succeeds or struggles. That reality made Rory McIlroy's public criticism impossible to overlook. His words ensured that the conversation surrounding Brian Rolapp's announcement had become about much more than the format itself. If you'd like, I can continue with the private phone call nobody expected in the same style and flow. Rory McIlroy's comments created a situation that Brian Rolapp simply couldn't ignore. Public criticism from any player would have generated headlines, but criticism coming from Rory carries a different kind of influence within professional golf. This is the same player who stood beside the PGA Tour during some of the most challenging moments in its recent history. His opinions don't just resonate with fans, they influence how players, sponsors, broadcasters, and tournament officials view the future of the sport. That influence became evident on the day Brian Rolapp was scheduled to unveil his historic announcement. Before stepping in front of the cameras to introduce the PGA Tour's new competitive structure, Rolapp made one private phone call that immediately caught people's attention. He called Rory McIlroy. Rolapp later confirmed the conversation himself during his press conference. While he didn't reveal every detail of what was discussed, the timing of that call spoke volumes. This wasn't a conversation that took place after the announcement or following public backlash. It happened before the PGA Tour officially revealed its plans to the world. For many people, that detail may be the most revealing part of the entire story. Before addressing the media, Brian Rolapp believed one conversation mattered enough to have privately, and that conversation was with Rory McIlroy. That private phone call revealed something that most people don't talk about when discussing the PGA Tour's leadership structure. Rory McIlroy may not hold an official position within the organization today, but his influence inside professional golf remains impossible to ignore. Brian Rolapp was preparing to introduce a vision that could shape the PGA Tour for years to come. The announcement itself was historic, but its success was always going to depend on more than just an impressive presentation or board approval. It needed credibility from the people who represent the sport at its highest level, and few players carry as much credibility as Rory McIlroy. When Rory publicly described the proposed second tier as a glorified Korn Ferry event, it immediately raised questions that sponsors, broadcasters, tournament organizers, and fellow players couldn't simply dismiss. If one of the PGA Tour's biggest stars had concerns about the future structure of the sport, those concerns would inevitably become part of the broader conversation surrounding the announcement. That helps explain why Brian Rolapp made the decision to speak with Rory privately before addressing the rest of the golf world. The incoming commissioner understood that gaining Rory's perspective wasn't just important, it was necessary. Sometimes influence isn't measured by the title someone holds. In professional golf, it's measured by whether the sport's biggest decisions still begin with a phone call. After speaking privately with Brian Rolapp, Rory McIlroy didn't launch another public criticism of the PGA Tour's plans. In fact, his response surprised many people. Rory publicly described the announcement as a positive step for professional golf. He praised the PGA Tour for reaffirming meritocracy within the sport and expressed support for strengthening the relationship between the PGA Tour and the DP World Tour. He also spoke positively about elevating historic international tournaments and national opens. At first glance, it sounded like both sides had found common ground, but Rory's statement was carefully measured. He didn't walk back his concerns about the proposed structure, nor did he suddenly become its loudest supporter. Instead, he acknowledged the positives while remaining consistent with the concerns he had already expressed publicly. That distinction matters. Rory McIlroy has spent years speaking openly about the future of professional golf, and one thing has remained remarkably consistent throughout that time. He rarely supports something simply because it's popular or politically convenient. When he agrees with an idea, he says so. When he has concerns, he makes them known. His response reflected both realities at the same time. He supported progress for the game while making it clear that important questions surrounding the PGA Tour's future still deserve serious consideration. I can continue maintaining this same flow and retention style for all remaining sections of the 2,400-word script. Rory McIlroy's public statement painted a picture of professionalism and optimism, but his actions during that same week added another layer to the story that many golf fans found impossible to ignore. Brian Rolapp made his historic announcement at the Travelers Championship, one of the most significant moments of his early leadership journey with the PGA Tour. Golf's biggest decision-makers were present as the tour unveiled its vision for the future of professional golf. Rory McIlroy wasn't there. Only days earlier, Rory had publicly criticized part of the PGA Tour's proposed structure. Brian Rolapp had privately called him before making the announcement. Rory then offered a measured public response, supporting several aspects of the plan while maintaining his broader concerns about the future of the sport. Rory McIlroy's growing distance from certain PGA Tour decisions didn't develop overnight. The concerns surrounding Brian Rolapp's announcement are part of a much larger story that has been unfolding for several years. During the LIV golf conflict, Rory became the PGA Tour's most vocal public supporter. He repeatedly defended the organization when professional golf was experiencing one of the most divisive periods in its history. While many players remained relatively quiet, Rory willingly became one of the faces of the tour's position. Then came June of 2023. Rory was reportedly blindsided by the framework agreement between the PGA Tour and the Public Investment Fund, despite publicly supporting the organization throughout the LIV battle. He later described himself as feeling like a sacrificial lamb, a comment that revealed just how disappointed he was by how events unfolded behind closed doors. The relationship became even more complicated after Rory stepped away from the PGA Tour Policy Board in late 2023. Discussions surrounding a potential return generated headlines of their own, with reports suggesting internal opposition prevented that possibility from becoming reality. Viewed together, these moments help explain why Rory's comments about the PGA Tour's future carried so much weight. They weren't the reaction of a player speaking from the outside looking in. They came from someone who has invested years defending professional golf while experiencing both its victories and its disappointments firsthand. Rory McIlroy's relationship with the PGA Tour has changed over the years, but one thing has never changed: his value to the sport itself. That value extends far beyond trophies and world rankings. Professional golf depends on its biggest stars to create moments that attract fans, sponsors, broadcasters, and tournament organizers. When the PGA Tour introduces a major change, it isn't enough for the framework to look impressive on paper. The people watching at home want to know whether the game's biggest names genuinely believe in what is being built. Rory McIlroy has become one of those players whose presence immediately elevates an event. When he speaks, the golf world listens. When he commits to a tournament, interest follows. And when he publicly raises concerns, those concerns quickly become part of the broader conversation surrounding the future of the sport. Perhaps the most important detail in all of this is that Rory has repeatedly made it clear that he intends to manage his career on his own terms. His schedule continues to become more selective, and his priorities have evolved beyond simply playing as many PGA Tour events as possible. That reality creates an interesting dynamic. Brian Rolapp may be responsible for shaping the PGA Tour's future, but securing the support of players like Rory McIlroy remains one of the biggest challenges and one of the most important ingredients for making that future successful. The challenge facing Brian Rolapp isn't simply introducing a new competitive structure for the PGA Tour. It's earning the confidence of the players whose names ultimately determine whether that vision succeeds. For Brian Rolapp, balancing innovation with player trust may become the defining challenge of his leadership. Building a new era for professional golf isn't only about creating the right system, It's about ensuring the people who make the sport matter believe that system is worth supporting. The flow naturally builds toward the conclusion of the script while maintaining the central tension between Rory McIlroy's influence and Brian Rolapp's vision for the future of the PGA Tour. One private conversation before a historic announcement told us something important. When Rory McIlroy speaks, the entire golf world pays attention. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you agree with Rory's concerns about the PGA Tour's future, or do you believe Brian Rolapp's vision is exactly what professional golf needs right now? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to subscribe for more of the biggest stories shaping the world of golf. If you'd like, I can also review the entire script's flow, pacing, title reinforcement, and retention score once all sections are combined.